Welcome to another episode of Business, Bourbon, and Cigars. I'm your host, Scott Joseph, and today we have an exciting and insightful episode lined up for you. Today, we're going to dive deep into the world of real estate investment and entrepreneurship with someone who has not only shattered glass ceilings, but has paved a path for other women in the industry. And before we dive in, if you haven't done so already, this is your reminder to subscribe to Me Plus Ultra at meplusultra.com, and also follow us and subscribe on our YouTube channel, which is Me Plus Ultra Network. That way you stay updated on all the latest content and you never miss an episode. So our guest today is Veena Jetti. She's the founding partner of Vive Funds and the mastermind behind Multifamily, which is a thriving community of investors. She has an impressive real estate portfolio with over 1 billion. That's a B, everyone, not an M, a B. 1 billion in multifamily transactions. She brings a unique and dynamic perspective to acquiring, managing, and operating real estate assets. But Veena's journey isn't just about real estate. It's about empowerment and community. And for me, most importantly, creating a lasting impact. So if you're a woman entrepreneur, maybe you're someone that's just curious about real estate investing, or you're just simply looking for inspiration in navigating this entrepreneurial journey you're in for quite a treat today. So grab your bourbon. By the way, if you're listening to the episode while you're driving any type of vehicle, please don't grab a bourbon. But if you're listening to this at night and you're relaxed, grab a bourbon, light up a cigar, and get ready to learn from one of the most influential voices in the industry. Let's jump right in. Veena, welcome to Business, Bourbon, and Cigars.
Hi, thank you for having me. I loved the intro.
So I always worry about that.
21. If you're not 21, do not grab a bourbon either.
That's true. That is true.
All the legal disclaimers.
Although I don't know how, neither one of us have a target audience in under 21, but maybe we're just paying it forward.
Yeah, no, just in case, you got to CYA right on everything nowadays.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about your story and your journey so the audience gets to know you a little bit better. And I guess what I'm really interested in, like the key milestones, right? As you start off, what were some of the key milestones that when you look back really inspired you to pursue this path?
Well, it's not an accident that I was a real estate investor. It was definitely an accident that I ended up in the multifamily space that I didn't know was going to happen. Looking back, I think probably one of the most pivotal moments was the minute I realized that multifamily was not just for like Jeff Bezos and Oprah and the Rockefeller. Like it was for the Veena Jettis of the world. Because that was a limiting belief. And it wasn't just because it was a limiting belief that I placed on myself, but it also was just, I didn't know what I didn't know. And that was a major pivotal moment because it opened up this whole world of transactions that I would never have known about or never have participated in. So I think that was like the first big pivotal moment now. And it's easy to say it now, looking back and connecting the dots backwards. It's very hard to do this in foresight.
So let me ask you brought up limiting beliefs. I love that. So how did you overcome it? How did you turn the limiting belief into an empowering belief?
I don't know if I ever actually did that, quite frankly. Like I ascribe to Jen Gottlieb's way of thinking, right? Where she says, okay, you can be afraid. Fear can ride in the car with you. It can be in the passenger seat, but I don't let fear stop me. I don't let it tell me which directions to go. You can't touch the radio. You have to wear your seatbelt and you have to be quiet in the front seat, but you can come. And I think that allowing or having that permission to be afraid is really helpful. But then also just like doing it anyway. And what I've found is the more you fail, the less scary it is to fail because you just accept it as part of the journey to success.
Now, where are you located?
I'm in Dallas, Frisco. If you're from Dallas, I'm actually in Frisco. If you're not from Dallas, then I'm in Dallas.
Love Dallas. I got some good friends down there, and some are frequent actually guest on our Me Plus Ultra network that we do when we do live streams as well. So Dave Boyle and some of those guys down there, John Traver. Yeah. So and I assume a lot of your multifamilies are in Texas. Like, do you have a preference when you're looking for these things, like where to invest?
So interestingly, the last time I closed on a multifamily asset in Texas was in 2018. I am currently under contract. If we were doing this 10 days from now, I would have just closed on another asset in Dallas. But I don't own a lot in Dallas. So this will be my second one in Dallas currently. I've owned many in Dallas, but we've sold all of them since. But yeah, I've owned like, I don't even know, maybe like half a dozen, a little bit more in Texas. It's very hard to buy in Dallas right now because this is the hottest market in the entire country. And so everybody is investing here. But yeah, if I find a Dallas deal that underwrites, I love that. We target Texas, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Arizona. Those are our target states.
Why? I feel like I know why, but I
don't. So number one is population growth. We want areas that are actively growing because that means more tenant base, more demand. Obviously, supply and demand is important when you're in the scale business. But also, these are very landlord-friendly states. And that is a real challenge when you own in some of the states that are more tenant-friendly, because what ends up happening is, and we saw this even in the red states during COVID. So this is not unique to just non-landlord friendly states. But during COVID, there would be these eviction moratoriums, which is, I fundamentally understood because we were in the middle of a global pandemic. The issue, or kind of one of the things that weren't really thought through, is how do we prevent people who are still working that are just taking advantage of this loophole because their friend told them to do it. And we're still seeing some of the fallout from that on some of our assets. So it was very much a very real problem. But even now, states that are landlord friendly, they allow me to evict someone who is like causing harm, who's disrupting the asset, who's not paying their rent. They allow me to evict in about 21 days on the fast side. Some of them takes a little bit longer, like 45 to 60 days. But if you're in a state like Illinois, for example, if you're in Cook County in Illinois, it could take you 6 months to a year to get someone out. And while they're there, you have to maintain utilities. If you provide utilities, you have to keep the locks the same. You can't just go in and change the lock. You have to maintain the asset to safety and habitable conditions. So even though you have a non-paying tenant in there, you can't really do much other than just continue operating it. And it's unfortunate because when you have like one unit, like one single family, you're still subject to these rules. But that's why I prefer multifamily, because if I have 500 doors and one person is doing this, it's not ideal, but it's also not going to break the bank or put the asset into default.
Looking back, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced growing this portfolio to where you have it, and how did it kind of shape your approach to business?
So it's changed over the years. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when I started investing for myself in real estate, I come from a corporate real estate background. But when I left in 2012 and started my own company to start investing, we were like just starting to ride back up after the 2007, 2008 crash. And it was a really great time. Basically, you could close your eyes, point at a map, and you would make money. You had to like really try hard to lose money pre-2021. Now in 2022, we know what happened, right? Like in 18 months, the Fed took the interest rates through the roof. It caused a lot of destabilization throughout the multifamily environment, but also we saw sectors like office and hospitality get significantly impacted, not just by interest rate increases, but also by COVID. And so what we've always loved about multifamily is it has the highest Sharpe ratio, right? It has the highest amount of potential reward for the least amount of relative risk. And that's true for multifamily as an asset class. It outperforms other asset classes, and it significantly outperforms the S&P 500 and is also tax beneficial. So all of those are really great reasons to have multifamily in the portfolio. Strategically, we used to go after like some of the assets I bought back in like 2015, 2017, 2019 even are not assets I would even underwrite today, let alone buy and operate. Because a lot of those were what I would call solid, like class B, B minus assets, which means when COVID hit, we faced a massive issue on those assets because a lot of these are essential workers that were going to work before there was a vaccine available, and they were catching COVID. They'd be furloughed. They'd be out of work for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 5 weeks, and then they couldn't pay rent because they're living paycheck to paycheck. This is like the definition of workforce housing. And I love workforce housing because I like the idea of investing into communities, and I like supporting communities that are working communities because I think that's an everyday American. However, from an investment thesis, it's very tough to navigate, especially with as much uncertainty as there was during COVID. And so now we really look at, even more so than like deep value add, we're looking at light value add to core plus assets where we're not relying as much on the market and speculating what's going to happen in the market. Really, what we're relying on is actual data of what's being done today that we can then further implement and enhance the NOI further. So that, those are all strategic shifts that we've made since we started to where we are today. And it's going to continue changing. I mean, I get asked all the time, like, do you still buy right now? At every point in the market cycle, we acquire. Just our strategy changes. Otherwise, I wouldn't be operating my business half the time. So yes, we always are acquiring. It's just our strategic focus changes.
So you're obviously very successful financially. So I can't imagine you only being driven by the numbers. There's got to be a sense of purpose. So like, what drives you beyond the numbers?
Oh yeah. I'm like not even a little bit numbers driven today in terms of my own compensation. We do make good money, and we do really well. We also have invested our money pretty significantly. Like we live way below our means, like I don't have like this room I'm sitting in my house. I like don't have furniture in this room, and I've lived here for 10 years. I just don't prioritize my money on decorating my home and like making it beautiful. I'm like, okay, yeah, I could spend 25 grand decorating this house, or I can go and buy another investment. And so that's how I've always been. It's how I was raised. But today, the reason I do what I do is not for the numbers or the bottom line for me. It's for multiple reasons. Number one, we have really solid relationships with our investors, and they trust us, and we have a really good like rapport with them. And so we want to continue creating opportunity for our investors. So that's number one. Number two, and probably the most important reason for me, is in real estate private equity, there's not a whole lot of women and there's not a whole lot of minorities. And I have two brown daughters that I'm raising. And it is important to me that I leave a legacy behind where women and minorities and people who don't come from Ivy League backgrounds or who don't come from trust funds, like everyday people, recognize that they too can do this and they can create generational wealth. And it's hard. It's not for everybody. It is hard. But anybody who really drills down into it and takes the time to put in the practice, to put in the reps, can do this too. It is possible for you too. And so it's important for me to change the landscape and see more diversity and inclusivity at the highest levels of operation. So when my daughters go out into their world and career and whatever they decide to do when they're older, I want them to belong in these rooms. I want it to be not noteworthy what I've done, because there should be so many other people who have done what I've done that it's like, okay, yeah, so. And that's my goal for my daughters, to have that kind of world built for them. So I want to change that.
When I was younger, I'm Lebanese. So when I was younger, I was sitting in front of the television. I was watching, back in, I don't know if this was national, but like Uncle Al or one of those shows for little kids. There was a black gentleman that came on the show. And I said, Mom, get in here. Look at this. Look at his tan. And mom had to explain to me the difference because I lived out in this rural part. And mom had to explain the difference. And she said, I looked down at my arm and I go, well, what am I? Because I'm in the summer, I get dark.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's so important. Like representation is so important.
So yeah, it made me laugh when you start, not laugh, but it made me think of that story when you. And then on my college application, I actually checked other because they didn't have a. But let me ask you this question, and you brought the Jeff Bezos up really early on, and I think that's in that limiting belief and that mindset. So talk to us a little bit about Vive Funds, and because you mentioned investors is part of your purpose and what really drives you, and nothing gets you going more than not wanting to let down or do right by the people that trust you, right? And so talk to me, like, how did that start? And then for the people that out there that might have the same limiting belief that you started with, right? What's a good entryway in for them?
Yeah. So I tell everybody this. If you want to sleep like a baby at night, never raise money from other people because you will never sleep the same again, period. Even in the best of times, you still won't sleep the same because there's always going to be that thought in the back of your mind that I have this massive weight of responsibility of someone else's money. And I don't want to lose that. So that never goes away. The minute you take in other people's money, OPM, you will have this thought. And if you are okay with that and you can stomach that, then you should do it, but you should always do it the right way. So the first thing that I did was I actually called my securities attorney. I've been working with him for over 15 years now. His name is Nick McGrew. He's based out of LA. He's phenomenal. If you're even thinking about raising capital, your first call should be to him. And he's Nick the lawyer, NIC the lawyer on Instagram. He does so much free content and education, and it's awesome, like really well explained. So you guys should find him there and follow him. But I called him and I was like, hey, so I have like friends that want to give me money to do real estate stuff.
Yeah. Because they don't want to mess with it, but they want to be involved.
That's exactly it. And
that's right.
I had investors that wanted to get involved when I was doing single family. They were like, you go out, buy the house, you do all the things, and we'll split it 50-50 and I'll write the check. I was like, okay, I think that is not allowed and it feels illegal. So that's when I called Nick and I was like, hey, Nick, this is what someone wants to give me a check for $100,000. He was like, yeah, you can do that. And I was like, what? And then he started talking to me about the exemptions of the SEC, like Reg D 506B, 506C. At that time, Reg CF and Reg A weren't really on the table, and they weren't really viable options for multifamily or for real estate in general because of how quickly real estate moves. So we were mostly talking about Reg D. And he explained to me like all the different exemptions and what we had to do. And I was like, so I can just take this check? He's like, yeah. He's like, you can do it, asterisk. You have to do it the right way. You have to have a PPM and you have to put this into, you have to register this on Edgar and blah, 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 all the things, but you can do it. So it's like, okay. So for my first deal, we raised money. I can't remember how much we had to raise, but I had to raise $1.2 million. And I was like, I've never raised money before. And for whatever reason, and I feel like this is true even now, like when you've never raised money before, you're like, yeah, it's easy. I can do it. And then you go to do it. It's really not easy. It is hard to raise money. I cried myself to sleep every night for 6 weeks straight when I was raising that $1.2 million because I didn't know what I was doing. I had nothing prepared. Everyone was like, oh my gosh, Veena, we support you. We think you're going to be amazing. Come back to us on your second deal. I'm like, well, how am I ever going to get a second deal if I can't close the first one?
So you're buying, I assume, $5 to $6 million asset?
No. So we had a partnership, and that asset we bought for $15.9 million. Now this was like 10 years ago almost. So at that time.
So the 1.2 you're raising was going to be for a percentage of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So I was on like the acquisitions and asset management. And then a portion of what I was doing was we all were raising capital. It wasn't like, oh, you have to raise this amount, otherwise you get kicked out or anything like that. But that was the obligation I had made. And I thought I wasn't going to close that deal. I thought I ruined my family's financial position. I thought we were going to lose a few $100,000 in earnest money. So it was a $15.9 million asset. We ended up closing it and made our investors a boatload of money, like a 25% IRR in 3 years. And so it was a massive return. And after that, it was like off to the races. And since then, across all the deals that I've done, we've raised a little over, I think once we close out this deal in Dallas, it'll be a little over $400 million.
Now, when the people invest with you, do they get the benefits of the depreciation and all that type of all the other same benefits that if I bought this on my own, I'd get cost segs and all that?
Yep. They'll get cost seg. They'll get K1s because we're structured as equity, not debt. They get the benefit of ownership.
Nice. All right. So definitely at the end, we'll give everybody the link, and I'll put that link in our show description so people, if they want to access it quickly and aren't in a position where they can remember it or write it down, we'll make it easy for them. All right. So talk to us a little bit about Multify. So what is that exactly?
So it's actually now called Multi-Mastermind, and it is a community of like-minded investors. These are people like you and I who want to get started. Maybe they don't know how to get started, or maybe they've done a deal or two, but they don't know how to scale up, or they've done small multifamily and they want to get to like those bigger multifamily. So it's a community is really what it is. More than anything, it's a community. And it is like my favorite thing that I do is be a catalyst in this community, because the type of individuals that show up are the people that are in like total alignment. And we do deals together. We learn from each other. We have so many members of the community that are doing so many cool things that they share with our community. So, and I didn't realize this when we started it, but what ends up happening is like we kind of leapfrog each other. And now everybody is growing together and everybody is doing things together because there's like the power of partnership. And, you know, I always said like I would never do mentorship. I would never do any of these things. And the reason was because I saw a lot of people doing it and I just hated the way that they were operating, or the people that were coming out, or the things they were teaching were sometimes like just downright illegal. Like I've seen so many of these communities that put out illegal strategies. And they're like, oh, this is the best way ever. Use this method to acquire multifamily. And I'm like, no, please no. Like these are like, this isn't a loophole that you've discovered. This is just a straight violation of SEC rules. And I'm very much so on like the conservative side. So I worry, especially when you have new investors who don't know any better and they're following you because you have a platform. You have a responsibility. You can't give bad advice. Even if it's well-intentioned, it has to be good advice when it comes to stuff like this, because the stakes are very high in this. And so all of that, I was like, I'm never going to do that. It's too much work. I don't want to. I was like, you know what I'll do? I'll find a community that I really love that aligns with me, and I'll just join that community and let someone else do all the hard work. Well, ultimately, I never found anything that really aligned with me. And there were no women-led communities for sure. There were no minority-led communities. And so for me, it became this thing of, okay, well, how can you speak to me if you have no idea what it's like to walk in my shoes? And so what I really love about the multi-community is we just attract a lot of diversity, and we attract a lot of people who kind of share similar value sets. So our 3 core values are abundance. So everybody shows up with abundance, which when you have that, it is so powerful. That is the most powerful value that you can share. Diversity is the other one, because like I said earlier, like I'm on a mission of impact, not a mission of money anymore. And then integrity, that's the third one, is like, this business requires a lot of partnership, a lot of trust, and you have to act with integrity. And you have to do the right thing for your investors at all times. And that's something that we hold like core to our business. And quite frankly, it's the secret sauce of our success. If you ask me the one thing we do, it's we operate with integrity with our investors. So our investors know that if things are not going as planned, which a lot of assets have had that happen in the last 18 months, but it's about how you communicate with them, what actions you take,
Correct.
how you handle it more
Are
than
you
anything.
running and hiding? Are you ghosting, or are you out front with it and constantly keeping everybody in the loop so they know that you're thinking about it and not trying to run away from it?
Yeah, exactly. And we're always learning. Like, I don't know everything about everything, but what I do know and what I can promise to our investors is that if we make mistakes in like how we strategized on something or what we did, we will learn from it and we will improve. We won't make the same mistake twice. And I'll give you a great example. So recently, we had communication that went out to investors about a rate cap expiring and what the plan was to handle it, whatever. And I had a few of our investors that have invested with me for years, like years across many assets. And I got an email, there were some questions, and then there was, why is this being communicated to us now instead of earlier on? And it felt like a dagger in my heart because this is an investor that I really care about. And I know that they're championing us too. Like, they've reinvested with us so many times. And I go, and my immediate reaction was like, oh my gosh, how could I have let investors down? And then I went back and I was like, it doesn't feel like this is the first time we're saying this, but I'm like, maybe in my mind, I thought we were saying it, when you're so in the thick of it, you realize it. But I went back and I was like, no. We started communicating back in June about this. And I told them too, I got on the call with them and I was like, look, we communicated this back in June, but I hear what you're saying is that it wasn't communicated enough. We didn't over communicate it. And we always want to over communicate. And when that investor who I have such a deep relationship with and deep trust with says this to me, it's something that I take very seriously. So now, after that feedback, we've gone back, we've updated our protocols, our SOPs, and I'll handle it differently on the next round. So I can't change what happened here, but I can acknowledge it and I can contemplate it. And, sometimes I get feedback and I'm like, this isn't good feedback. And I say, thank you so much for this input. And then I move forward however we think is best. But we're getting aggregate of many different investors' information and data and feedback when we're making these decisions.
That direct feedback that sometimes feels like a knife going right into your gut is sometimes the best, because you probably now have immediately, any type of these situations start to emerge, you're like, all right, I want to make sure it's very clear, and it just keeps improving your process. I got to tell you something with the multi-fi. I actually, with the mastermind, you can feel the energy and the joy when you talk about that. It's like it's more important to you, this community, than all the other stuff that you've done. So when we talked about your purpose and what really drives you, I felt like I was looking into a mirror, and I'm going to tell you why. So I've got Me Plus Ultra, which is the sponsor of this show, and it is a business mastermind group. I am having more fun and I have more joy in my life than at any time in the last 30 some odd years of my business career. All the things you said, in terms of leveling each other up, and it is unbelievable. And I just saw it, the energy in your voice and just, or the way you were talking about it, I'm loving it. But it's funny. So I started my group in reverse. I started it literally, we do two, we meet 3 times a month virtually, but then twice a year we get in person. And our flagship event is also called Business Bourbon and Cigars. So you brought up women. And we've got women finally. I think the name scared a few away initially.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. And so I had to tell them,
you just got to find the right ones.
well, I tried to tell him, I said, well, I live in Louisville. I said, all the women here drink bourbon. I said, but I have one woman, Lori Holter. She's a great member of ours. I could not do this without her. And she always says, we need to change this to business bourbon and cigars and white wine. And so but just the diversity, like for us, the diversity is not only men and women, but also the diversity in where they're at in their careers, right? And the industries they're in, because it brings so many different perspectives in terms of how we handle issues and barriers and obstacles or go after different opportunities. I absolutely love the whole thing. And it's funny because the women in our group, they've all formed their own. And I like to say we have a group that doesn't have cliques, but the women definitely bond together. And it's because they are looking for that. Why? Let me ask you a question. As a man,
Why is it?
this confuses me because like, I feel like any successful business person does not care who they're talking to, partnered with, as long as the person has a great value system and delivers results, right? So why talk to me? Let's get real on this. Why?
I could do like a whole 17 podcasts on this and
Let's
still
do
not.
it.
So I love this question. So first and foremost, thank you for being curious, because I think not enough men stop to ask this question. And I always tell people, like, this is the sign of a true alpha male, is a man who shows up to support women and asks the question of like, wait, how can I show up better for the women around me, the women in my life? So first of all, thank you. And thank you for being like shining example of what I define as true alpha male. So yeah, you can flex that muscle, drink the bourbon. Okay, so here's why. And there's many facets to this, right? But the first and foremost is, yes, it does not matter what your race, religion, sexual orientation, background, creed, color, like all of that really doesn't matter fundamentally. But when we look at the highest levels, right, like the C-suite, the decision makers and above, if we look just statistically, women and minorities are significantly underrepresented. Now that story is changing, but it hasn't reached equality, because look at Fortune 500s. Half of those CEOs are not women. And there are reasons for this. First and foremost is girls, young girls, are taught by the time they're 7, 8 years old, by the time they have fourth grade, they are discouraged from STEM. They are encouraged to be seen and not heard. They're discouraged from being bold, from saying the thing. Because what happens is, right, like I can say something and there will be some amount of people that'll say, wow, she is so bossy. You could say the exact same thing in the exact same tone and they'll go, wow, he's such a great leader. And so it's these nuances and these like almost, I don't want to use the word microaggressions because it sounds so over the top, but there are these little subtle nuances that signal to women and young girls that they don't belong in these spaces, that they should be seen, not heard, that they are there to please everybody else. And so there's this really great book I love called Fed Up by Gemma Hartley. Highly recommend this read for men and women, especially if you're a married man. This like transformed my husband and I's relationship.
A married man with 3 daughters.
There you go. Okay, yes, you will love this book. It talks about unpaid labor and invisible labor. And all the women listening to this podcast already know what I'm talking about. And most of the men are like, what do you mean exactly? Right. But here's what I'm talking about. Like in our home, before we read this book and before I was like, oh my gosh, babe, I am drowning and I need help. And he stepped up and helped. But before all of that, I did everything. I did all of the emotional, mental labor of the household. So for example, I know the birthday of all the members of my family. I know when it's coming up. I know my dad's birthday is next on November 19th. I have already ordered his gift because I know that we are not going to have time between now and November 19th to get his gift. I know that my husband's birthday is shortly after that, and I've already ordered his gift too. He's December 2nd. I've ordered his gift too. I know that Christmas is coming up, and I know that my in-laws and my parents and my sister are going to ask us what to get for the kids. So I've already started creating an Amazon list for that, right? So it's like all these things, I don't get paid to do any of them, but they're part of what keeps our household running. And so I go and I execute on these, or I delegate them to my husband. And my husband is awesome. If I ask him to do something, I only have to ask him once and it will be done. I never have to like nag him or worry about it because I don't like to micromanage, and I'm not going to do it with my husband either. But it's much easier to execute on something than it is to put the mental energy into project management. So as women, we are groomed this way from a young age, right? To like notice someone's feelings, ask if they need a hug, to when, like, have you heard this term? There's this term called kin keeping. So it's like when you go to Thanksgiving, just notice this when you go to your Thanksgiving gathering this year, right? When you go to Thanksgiving, note how many women will gather around in the kitchen helping the host, right? Like, so if I'm putting stuff out, all the women that walk into my door will immediately come to me and go, what can I help with?
At Christmas, nothing makes me happier than when my mother-in-law and a few other of the ladies show up, because it means I'm off the hook. I can.
There you go. That's exactly what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
And here's the thing. No one told me that I should help when I walk into the house. I just instinctively knew this because I've been groomed my whole life to be like this, right? And so men are not groomed that way. They're not raised that way. They're not taught that way. They're not good at it because they're not groomed, but they can be good at it because my husband is very competent. He's a physician. He's a very smart individual. And this was the conversation I had with him. I said, babe, this is so overwhelming for me. And he's like, well, just tell me what you need. And I'm like, no one gave me a manual for raising children either. Like, I don't know this stuff. When they have to go to preschool, like I researched preschools. I read about different ways to school them. I read all the mom blogs. I toured 18 different preschools to see which ones we like. I called my mom friends to ask them about it. I talked to my sister who has kids. I did all this work. And then my husband shows up to the tours of like the 4 that I liked and says, okay, babe, whatever you think. And then I do all of the mental energy of that. But like all of these things take a lot of time and energy and effort. And I didn't have these kids by myself. And so now, we made a list of all the world of things that I do and all like the 4 things he was doing. And we
will never make a list of my household.
Yeah, because it's a lot.
We're never going to make that list.
When we did, I would challenge you to do it though.
No.
Because when we made this list, it was eye-opening for him. He didn't even realize some of the things that I was doing. And I was like, how do you think that this happens? And so, this is why it's important for there to be women's spaces, though.
But here's the real question to all this.
Yeah.
How in the hell do you balance that and the work, the career part of it, the professional part versus the personal, right? Because I have no interest in learning how to do all that other home. Because to me, I'm like, I would never have the time. I can't figure out how to. So how do you balance that?
Well, and it's because you don't have to, right? You have a partner that does this for you and makes your life easy. So like what I always tell men is if you're not going to do the invisible labor and you're not going to divide it, which you should, because I'm building a life with my husband. I'm not building a life for my husband. I'm building it with him. But I challenge you to take on some of those tasks without being asked to do it, right? Like if you're going to give her a gift of house cleaning for Christmas, don't give her a gift card for house cleaning. That's more labor that you're putting on her, right? Instead, research it, get the reviews, put together everything that she is going to want to know, and then say, babe, I scheduled this for January 7th. There's going to be someone coming. You leave the house. I got this. I'm taking care of the kids. I'm doing everything. I don't want to hear from you. We will survive and we will be fine. That's really the intentional gifting, not giving her a gift card that now she has to go and do all of this labor to schedule it, to figure out what they're going to do, to clean the house before. No, that's not a gift. That's just more work, right? But here's how you do it. You really don't. You don't balance everything. When I'm here working, there's someone else raising my kids, right? My kids are at school. My kids are in front of a TV. They're with a nanny. They're with their grandparents or with my husband. When I'm with my kids, someone else is running my business. My employees, I have great employees. Without them, would not be possible. But it's why women's spaces are necessary, because we just face different challenges from a balanced perspective and a holistic perspective.
Boom. All right.
Yeah.
So there's our clip.
Yeah.
because
Soundbite.
that in itself right there, I get that you guys do all this stuff, not to the level that you just explained, by the way. That was incredible. But I always wondered, like, why are these women, why do they feel like they're alone? And like, they're because they're the only ones that fully understand it all.
Yeah, they just are alone. But I think too, the more women talk about this, the more we can kind of close some of that gap, and the more men step up to help lighten those loads. Because when all of these like domestic tasks and all this domestic labor was initially like divided up, it was back at a time where like men went out and worked and women stayed home. And that's just not where we are today. And more women are opening businesses. Women are, like, by all measure of an investor, they're better investors than men. So women should be in this space, but we can't do it all. And I remember I was super pregnant with, I have twins, right? So I had two babies at the same time. And I remember I was closing a deal. It was a $52 million purchase. At that time, that was the biggest purchase we'd made to date. This was back in 2019. And I remember I was sitting on my bathroom floor at 34 and a half weeks pregnant. And I would go on mute because we weren't on video. I'd go on mute. I'd puke because I had morning sickness all 35 weeks. And then I'd come back and I'd be like, yeah, that sounds great. And I'm like on the call. They had no idea that I was like puking in the toilet because I was so morning sick. But that was, I didn't have balance. I came back within 2 weeks of delivering twins. I had a C-section, and within 2 weeks, I was back taking calls and working because my company just needed me. My investors were counting on me despite this.
So I have to tell you, like, there is no glass ceiling in my companies. All right. Because I've been fortunate enough, like, I've got my very first company is a marketing agency. And one of our best sales reps we've ever had, top 5 that we've ever had, was a woman. And, back then, I think she was probably in her late 20s or early 30s, and she had multiple kids, selling 100% commission at the time. And literally every time she got pregnant, it was like the 8th and 9th month were some of her strongest months. And this is a true story. So when you're talking about all this multitasking and stuff in hand, I'm thinking to myself and throwing up in the bathroom, she closed deals while she was in labor on the bed in the hospital, literally closing deals. And I was like, what? Why are you doing that? And so I've always had this unbelievable, like, to me, that just, because I would have been like, nope, shut this down.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason there's a stereotype around the man cold, right? And
yes.
Women like go through so much more just to like deliver babies that it's insane. And I think too, honestly, when I look back on it, I'm not proud that happened, because I was doing it because of the culture, the toxic culture that exists in the business world, right? Like, I had so much fear. And even now I have so much fear around someone being like, oh, you're taking off to go to your kids' Halloween parade. Oh, you're not dedicated. You're not committed. Yeah. And it's like, no, but like, no one's ever asked my husband, like, if he does it, they're like, oh, what a good involved father.
That's why you should just look at the results.
Exactly.
And not care how, like, everybody gets there differently. Everybody's kind of got there, as long as every business got to have processes and stuff like that. But in the end, like, I always get in this debate. I value someone that gets the same result in 20 hours a week as the person that takes 60. I don't look at the person that works 60 as man, they're just a harder worker. If they get the same result, to me, the person working 60 hours is costing me more than right. I just feel like it's a no-brainer to me. I'd rather have the smarter person that gets stuff done like this.
Yes. Yeah, I remember when I was in corporate America, I would be penalized for being efficient and for being like smart at how I worked. Because they'd be like, oh, you finished that? Let me give you more work. And I'm like, well, then why am I doing this so efficiently? Let me slow down. So in my company, I don't do that. If I give you a task that takes the average person 10 hours to do and you do it in 4 hours, great. You just bought yourself 6 hours to do whatever you want with that time.
Exactly.
No problem. So we work really hard to achieve like work-life balance in our company. We do like random days where we'll close the office down like half day. Just if my employees are working really hard and they're sprinting for a long time, we'll just say like, look, we're closing at 2:00 today. Enjoy the rest of your day or whatever, we'll do this often, but we also do like unlimited PTO. And my employees are awesome. They're so dedicated to us. Like a lot of times they won't even use their PTO. So I have to force PTO on them. So what I'll do sometimes is that, like once I was like, hey, I booked you guys on a cruise. I'll pay for everything except for your internet. And if I catch you online, you will be fired. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yes, because I want you to decompress. I want you to unwind. I want you to be re-energized because burnout is so incredibly real. And I want them to be mentally in a good spot when they're working for me. Otherwise, I could just be like any other company and ride them into the ground. But I get way better results when we care and we show them we care.
All right. So real estate, I'm glad we're on this topic because real estate, and you've kind of said this as well with a lot of industry, it's kind of male dominated. So how have you navigated this space as a woman? And what advice would you have for other women entrepreneurs?
So the advice I have is that we belong at this table. We are good investors. We make very good instinctive and factual decisions. So we belong here. You belong here. If you are being shut out of a room, you are trying to get into the wrong room, find a different room where you are valued. That's like number one advice. There's many women, notable women that are in business, that are in entrepreneurship, that are in real estate that you can follow and align with. Stop aligning yourself with the wrong people. So that's like the advice, right? For me, navigating it is, one foot in front of the other. So I call out the misogyny when I see it. I was just telling someone yesterday that
I would love to be around you. I would do it intentionally just so you could call it out constantly.
Just to hear what I was saying. Oh yes. I mean, don't tempt me with a good time. Don't tempt me. And on social media, especially, people are meaner to women than they are to men. It's just the nature of social media. I had
that blows me away. I'll tell you why that blows me away, because are these people so dumb? Like everybody sees this. So I don't.
Oh yeah. I make sure that they see it too. So for a long time, I wouldn't say anything and it would really upset me and hurt my feelings and whatever. And then I just stopped caring about everything. And I also, so my alter ego is Petty Jetty. And when Petty Jetty comes out to play, it's never good for anybody involved. So I had a post from like earlier this year, like Q1 of this year. And I was speaking on a stage in front of like thousands of people. And, I had a skirt and a top and whatever and heels, the whole 9 yards. And I'm teaching about how I got to $1 billion in transactions. And I'm like teaching something tactical. And some guy who is brand new in this space and wants to be in this space says, oh, well, the length of your short skirt didn't hurt either watching this video, or something like that. Something that has never been said to a man on stage when he's telling you how he transacted on $1 billion. So I was like, okay, what do I do with this? I can ignore it. I can say something, or I can go a level further. So I opted for the level further. And I screenshotted his comments with his name. And I went to my stories and I posted and I said, $1 billion in transactions, and all you took away was the length of my skirt. Shame on you. And I tagged him and I posted it for everybody to see. And then he sends me this big, long apology. He's like, I've always admired you. I'm so sorry, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, you should be sorry because it's disgusting that you would show up in this way. And if you're showing up in this way to me and I'm a perfect stranger, I can only imagine the things you say and do when I'm not there to call you out on it. So yes, you should be sorry.
There's a difference when, and not to say that I would say that joke. I would not say that joke. But there were jokes I would say that I don't, that aren't along those lines. That, like, for instance, my wife follows me around everywhere, and it's like her job and mission to just say, he's just joking. He's just joking. He's just joking. It's so, and I'm like, they know I'm joking because I only say certain jokes to people I've got rapport with that know my personality, and they fire it right back to me.
Yeah.
But that's not a joke I'd say in person to anybody, but still, I definitely wouldn't do it to someone I've not met and have no rapport with. That just blows me away. How does he think that's going to be perceived?
Yeah, I'm not sure what what I can say is he did not intend for me to do what I did with it, which I think he's learned his lesson, and I don't think but like, you would be surprised at how common this is. Like, I've had men come up to me after I get off speaking on a stage, and they'll be like, I had this one guy once who came to me and was like, I have to apologize to you. And I was like, okay, do we know each other? Like, what are you apologizing for? He's like, I judged you based on the way you looked. And he's like, but after you spoke, I realized you are really smart.
All right. I'm glad. I am so happy you just gave that story.
Yeah.
And here's why. I have a theory. I believe that women, right or wrong, believe that there are barriers they have to overcome that men don't have to overcome, and or there are certain things that makes it harder to get into the business world. As a man who has hired a lot of female salespeople over the years, I have another belief for that exact reason, because it's true. I do believe that a lot of times a successful businessman subconsciously might not give a woman the same amount of instant authority or credibility that they might give a man same age, same experience. And that's, to me, that is such an advantage for a female, because it allows you to walk into a room where the bar has set lower for you.
Oh, yeah.
And I personally believe when you're competent, as competent or more, it's like you jump so high over the bar. It's like, in comparison to the man, you look like a brain surgeon. And it's like, so to me, and I'm just speaking from the male side of it, right? I'm like, to me, I see it as an advantage for you, not because of your look, because it's like they don't give you enough credibility for it. And it's like, man, does that make sense?
Definitely, it can be used as an advantage, but I take issue with the fact that this is even a premise that we're working on. But since we are working on this premise, and that's the way it currently is, and I want to change that, but while it's like this, yeah, I absolutely agree. This is totally an advantage, because when I walk into a room, I'm dismissed immediately. Just someone looking at me dismisses me. Like, the number of times that I have had men that have done less than me try to tell me the best practice for how I should run my business before they've even taken a moment to understand what it is I've done. I can't even, if I had a dime for every time that's happened, I would be richer than any man on this planet. But the reality is, this still happens. Like, and so you had the audacity to come to me to apologize to me for this totally sexist vision you had. Like, you don't have to say everything out loud. You can keep things to yourself. And this is one of those things. You should have said this to me. It did not add any value. And I was like, okay, like, thanks. You thought I was like smarter than I looked. Cool. I don't need to know this. You could have gone your whole life without telling me that, and we could have been just fine. But yeah, it can be used as an advantage, but I take issue with the fact that it happens in the first place. Like our daughters should not be just because they're women.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've talked a lot, and I want to respect your time. So I got a couple questions, if that's okay.
Yeah,
all right.
absolutely.
So you talk a little bit about generational wealth.
Yeah.
What advice would you give someone that's just starting to think about building wealth for future generations?
The best advice I ever got, the best financial advice I ever got, front and load your sacrifice. Meaning when you are younger, it is so much easier to live these like crazy minimalist, frugal lifestyles than when you get older and when you have children. The sooner you can start investing, the time value of money dictates that the time in the market is way more important than timing the market. So if you haven't started investing yet, start today. It wasn't your fault if you didn't know before, but now that you do know, you need to start today because going forward, it will be your fault. You're making a choice not to do this. So start early, invest as much as you can, live below your means. My husband and I have always lived a lifestyle that is well below what our income is. And I don't care about keeping up with the Joneses. I really just don't.
Such good advice, and so hard to do when you're young. I sacrificed my 20s, but in my 30s, I was able to do things that all the people that had fun in their 20s could not do.
Yep. You got to front and load it. It's so much easier. Honestly, it's so much easier to pull an all-nighter when you're like 23 years old, when you don't have any real responsibilities or care in the world, and then I'm 38 now, and I'm like, I have to be up till 10. I'm going to need like 4 days to recover from this wild late night out, right? Like your body does not move the same way at 38 as it did at 28 or 25 or 20. So the sooner you do it, the better off you're going to be.
So what's the easiest way for someone to reach you?
Instagram. I respond to my own messages on Instagram. Veena Jetti, VeenaJetti. And I'm also Veena Jetti on like all the platforms. But Instagram's the one I'm actually active on.
So just literally at Veena Jetti.
Veena Jetti. I also have a free Facebook community where we talk about multifamily. That's called Mastering Multifamily with Veena Jetti. You just answer the questions and it'll let you in.
And what was that again?
Mastering Multifamily with Veena Jetti.
Okay. Mastering Multi. So we'll put some of these links in our show note and make it easy for everybody. But Veena, I want to thank you. Great fun. I could have went another hour or two, by the way. I had a lot of other questions I wanted to ask you, but I do want to be respectful of your time, and we'll have you back on because
let's do it again. Yeah.
So we can make it a regular, and we need to get our mastermind groups talking. We should talk about that because I think
collab.
Yeah, because I've got a lot of people in my group that don't have a lot of experience in investing in multifamily and would love to get involved in what you're doing. Yeah. I guarantee that.
Let's do it.
So we'll talk. So I want to thank you for joining us today, sharing your wisdom, incredible journey. You give it. And by the way, as a father of 3 daughters, I love this conversation because I love how women are really coming together and said enough is enough. We can do this on our own. But you said a few things in here that really made it much more clear for me. I'm like, oh, I never thought of it. I never thought of it like that. Right? Yeah. You challenged the way I love that. So a lot of good insights. And man, if all those people trying to navigate the entrepreneurial journey, this should have been a big help. And especially early on when you talk about what you've accomplished, most people just don't. Like you said, this is for the Jeff Bezos. No, it's not. Just learn how to do and go. And there's so many people out there willing to help. You've got this community that will help people if they want to get into this world. So I encourage people to do that. So for our listeners, I hope today's episode has inspired you to think bigger, embrace both the challenges and the opportunities that are in your path. Remember, whether it's building wealth, empowering others, finding balance. We talked a lot about that today. There's a lesson in every step. So before we wrap up, Make sure you check out now what's the correct word?
Multimastermind.com.
Multimastermind.com, and consider joining this incredible community that Veena has built. We'll also have all the links in the show notes. So make sure you go to MePlusUltra.com, and we'll have everything in there. Make it easy for you. I highly encourage you to explore it. And finally, don't forget to subscribe to Me Plus Ultra at MePlusUltra.com. Also, the Me Plus Ultra Network on YouTube. Leave us a review, share the episode, and join us on the next inspiring conversation. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Business, Bourbon, and Cigars. Cheers, everyone.